Pyra and Mythra's alternate costumes in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is an interesting case in that some of the references were just told to us, while others were just kind of a generic or unique color scheme. This is weird because with Ultimate newcomers, either all of the fighters' costumes are a reference to something, or they were just a color palette that the developers thought looked cool for the character. This isn't the case with Pyra and Mythra since a lot of their costumes are nearly identical to their in-game counterparts. And because they come from a Xenoblade game, of course there's going to be a lot of meta Xenoverse references sprinkled into their costumes. I thought it would be fun to take a look at Pyra and Mythra's costumes today and see what interesting details we can find. Fair warning that this video will spoil a few things from Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and probably some of the other games, so if you haven't played those games then I would recommend turning away and doing that now. But if you don't mind spoilers, then let's move on to the first costume. Costume number 1 is the most explanatory of the bunch. It's just Pyra and Mythra. The only difference in their costumes here is that there's some censorship to comply with the game's lower age rating compared to Xenoblade 2's. Something worth mentioning is that this version of Mythra was actually in Smash since the game's launch, albeit as a spirit. Later on after release, along with the release of Torn of the Golden Country, Mythra's Smash costume was actually patched into Xenoblade 2 as an aux core and called the Massive Melee Mythra. It even buffs her critical hit rate just like the spirit does, which is a neat touch. It's cool to see that, and it makes me wish we got an alternate costume for Pyra as part of her getting into Smash as well. Costume number 2 is a reference to Numa from Xenoblade Chronicles 2, who you can fight as a spirit in Pyra and Mythra's DLC board, giving both of them Numa's green and teal colors. The only other thing that it can possibly reference is Pyra's costume in Xenoblade 2 called Blue Sky Pyra, but the colors on it are a little too different from Numa's palette for that to be confirmed. I guess that means Smash is better at making Pyra look like Numa than the actual creators are. Moving on to costume 3, this one likes to confuse people who haven't played Xenoblade 2 and aren't familiar with Pyra and Mythra. Inverting their colors, this costume makes Pyra look like Mythra and Mythra look like Pyra. This is another reference to an in-game costume the Aegis girls get, fittingly named Mythra-style Pyra and Pyra-style Mythra. The only difference between Xenoblade's costumes and the ones in Smash is that Smash still works around the censored designs, technically making them Smash original designs. Costume number 4 technically turns them into cat girls. Pyra's brown hair and overall brown clothes are a pretty clear reference to her Gormati disguise that she wears early in the game. She wears it because she's trying to hide from Morodain and several other factions, because obviously they want the power of the Aegis for themselves. I think it would have been really cool if they actually had the Gormati hood in Smash, especially since that would have been a really unique costume and a good way to hide her core crystal, but I guess that's what mods are for. Mythra, on the other hand, is more of a reference to one of the party members, Nia, and you can actually see her in the background of the All-Rest stage. Her silver hair and yellow outfit make her look pretty close to Nia, and since she's from Gorma, it only seems fitting that the two get paired together. Moving on to the last 4 costumes, these are the ones that Sakurai left the players to figure out on their own. All he really told us was, these are the color schemes, and these are maybe what we're alluding to. Because of that, take the next few things with a grain of salt, as it's all just fun speculation. With that said, costume number 5 is the evil Pyra and evil Mythra variants that every fighter has to have to make them look imposing or villainous. Interestingly enough, this is also the only costume that changes the color of their core crystal from emerald green to dark red. This color scheme at first seems like a reference to Malos, who is the main villain of Xenoblade 2 and Torna. However, while Malos does use a lot of purple with his powers and overall look, his core crystal isn't red, it's a deep purple. It could also be a reference to the artificial blade Poppy, who is also a character in the background of the All-Rest stage. This one can be backed up a little bit more than Malos since it has a lot more resemblance to Poppy QT Pie, which is the ultimate form of Poppy. One other possibility is that it could be a reference to Alvis from Xenoblade 1 or Ontos since he has a red core crystal, but the outfits don't really match up as well as Malos or Poppy. However, the costume does feel a little more sinister, and since Poppy is actually best girl, I'm going to say that it's a bit more of a Malos skin or that generic evil version of the character. Alt 6 kinda has this mech thing going on, since the color scheme of Pyra and Mythra look and feel a lot more like Gundam. This kind of overlap does make sense since the Xeno series is attributed with big Gundam suits, such as Siren or the Skells in Xenoblade X. Some people think their costume, specifically Pyra, is a reference to an important Xenosaga character called Cosmos. However, Cosmos has a bunch of different designs and none of them really match up with the Aegis here, so assuming it's a Gundam reference is probably safe enough, given how big they are over in Japan. Now moving on to costume 7, we have a much more vibrant Pyra and a white Mythra. It might seem like a Smash original costume since it just kind of looks like the saturation dial was bumped up, but believe it or not, Pyra herself is actually a reference this time, especially because her core crystal was changed to blue. Now that color scheme of mostly red with blue highlights brings to mind the Monado, which is Shulk's sword in Xenoblade 1 and Smash Bros. Mythra, on the other hand, is a bit of a secret spoiler, and because of her vague color scheme, she resembles the character Catalyst. You can Google that if you want to, but I won't be spoiling it for the community. Alternatively, Pyra is the replica Monado EX, and Mythra is the World Ender, which is Melia's new staff in Future Connected. That's about the closest match that I can think for Mythra that would connect back to the Monado. And finally, we have Costume 8, which is Gold Pyra and Silver Mythra. This one can be one of many possible references, so I'll just blow through them really quick. Gold Pyra can be seen as a reference to Xenoblade 1's main villain, Zanza. She even has a pretty similar hairstyle to him. Whereas Mythra could be seen as a reference to Maineth, also known as Galea, who was the female scientist trying to stop Zanza in a flashback cutscene. Alternatively, and quite possibly the biggest one, is that Pyra looks almost identical to the Zohar, which is the most important item in the Xenosaga universe. Either that or the conduit in Xenoblade 2, which basically gave Pyra and Mythra their powers in the first place. Their core crystal was even shaped similarly to the Zohar. Mythra, on the other hand, is a little weird. It's possible that with all the gray and silver on her, she's supposed to look a lot like Jin, who is a massively important character in Xenoblade 2 and Torna the Golden Country. If we are going with the Mythra looking like Jin route, that could also mean that Pyra references all of Torna, literally being the Golden Country. And then there's the really stupid thing where at one point in Xenoblade 2 in the land of Moritha, Rex references to Pyra and Mythra together as being like coffee with milk. And Pyra, while mostly being golden colored, does have some brown on her, and while Mythra's silver is silver, it might as well just be white depending on how you look at it. So we might as well just be looking at Coffee Pyra and Milky Mythra in their last alt. Anyway, like and subscribe for more Xenoblade content, and thank you so much for watching as always.